This is Julia with iCadenza, and I'm here with the great mezzo-soprano Dolora Zajick, who is here in Los Angeles performing Lohengrin with Los Angeles Opera, and we actually got to catch up with her a little bit earlier, a couple months ago at San Francisco Opera as well, so it's so great to see you again.
It's good to see you too.
Thank you. Well, my first question is, I know you had a really unconventional beginning with opera. You originally trained to be pre-med, and that's what you studied in university. How did you make the transition to opera?
Well, actually, it's not that unusual. It's very common to find people going from medicine to music and from music to medicine, especially singing. There seems to be some common abilities and skills that go along with being a good diagnostician, which I call kinesthetic empathy. It's the ability to imagine what the other person is feeling and to have that kind of kinesthetic empathy where you can sense what the other person's feeling physically is a very important part of being a singer or a good doctor that diagnoses things. And then he compares that with what he knows, is the knowledge that he has, because sometimes you can get patients that are not very articulate, and so a doctor needs to have these kinds of skills to detect what's really going on with a patient.
It's really fascinating. So what was your story? How did you get into opera?
Well, I wanted to be an instrumentalist, but circumstances didn't allow it when I was a child, and so I put my sights on being a doctor, and then I discovered that I had a voice and found out that it wasn't too late to be in music, and that's how I really ended up in music.
And I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
What instrument did you originally want to play?
Piano.
So you studied piano, you just couldn't pursue it?
No, I was not able to study piano.
Okay, I see.
So I had a late start in that sense, but I caught up quickly.
You certainly did. I believe you started studying singing when you were 21, and you made your
22.
Oh, was it 22? And that same year you sang your first role?
Yes.
Incredible. What was your first role?
Kate in the Pirates of Penzance, and at that time I didn't have any high notes, and the lady who was singing Edith didn't have any low notes, so I sang her low notes and she sang my high notes.
That's too funny.
And the director liked it so much that he left it in. She would say, "Let us shut our eyes and leave them there together." That's what I would do. And she'd go, "Let us shut our eyes and talk about the weather."
That's too funny.
And the director liked it so much that he left it in. So, but then, after a year I had high notes and she had low notes, so it was all a moot point after that.
Isn't that the best? Take one singer's best notes, the other singer's best notes, so you get the perfect combination. That's too funny. So did anyone, oftentimes with young mezzo-sopranos, they're first touted as sopranos, and then ultimately it's discovered that they're really a mezzo. It sounds like that was not the case for you.
Well, actually it's the other way around. What happens is that a lot of times sopranos haven't learned to access their high notes yet, and so they're basically slotted into the mezzo rep to accommodate their inability to sing high notes, and then when they start to learn how to sing high notes, all of a sudden they make a switch to soprano. In fact, if you find vocal switches, it's usually to a higher voice. It's baritones to tenors usually, and it's mezzos to sopranos. You'll find a lot of that in training programs. When they finally get with good teachers, they finally get into a situation where someone says, "Well, this is where your passaggio is. You're not a mezzo, my dear, or you're not a baritone." And that happens a lot with young singers.
Speaking of differences in how to approach young singers and how to train them and support them through the process of developing their voices, you have a wonderful Institute for Dramatic and Unusual Voices where you work with very young singers, actually, helping them develop what you believe is already clear, that they have these unusual and powerful voices. Can you talk about your institute and the work that you're doing there?
Well, we go on a search for these voices. We want to get them when they're very young, if possible. We do have some older singers that we take at later stages, but the majority we take when they're very young, and start to get them on the right track. One of the problems that you have is that singers used to get regular training every day, and girls could start as young as 12. young men started as young as 15, and they made their debuts 10 years earlier. Well, something changed between now and then. One of the things that changed was that instruments got louder, and they were designed to make more sound, and theaters got bigger. So now if a singer wants to sing that more dramatic rep that has a lot of brass, especially music that has a lot of brass in it, they have to wait until they physically mature to a certain point. The problem with that is that by the time they get to that age, they don't have the experience that their more lyric counterparts have. And then by the time they turn 35, they're saying, well, they got a voice, but where's the rest of it? We can't use them. And so we're trying to solve that problem. They get acting. We teach them how to learn a role. We show them that they can sing this rep, but they need to sing it in the right venue. They can't sing it with a large orchestra. They need to sing it in an acoustically friendly house with a sympathetic conductor, and they can do it with piano. I mean, there are many there are ways to do it to get that experience. And so what we do is we help fill that gap where they don't get that experience at that age, so that by the time they're ready to emerge on an international level, they have these skills already in place.
It's so wonderful, the work that you're doing. What would you suggest to a young singer? What advice do you have for them? What are some of the most important things for them to keep in mind as they develop their voices?
The most important thing is to find the right voice teacher. One of the mistakes young singers make is they think, oh boy, I get to go to this famous conservatory. Well, what usually happens is you audition at the conservatory and you are chosen by the teacher. You don't get to choose the teacher in a lot of cases. And sometimes you end up at the bottom of the barrel in terms of who's on the faculty. So it's important to find out who that teacher is that's right for you, and then follow that teacher. That would be the first advice. The second would be, make sure you really know what you're doing technically before you tackle something. It's not so much that singers are singing repertoire that's too heavy if they're dramatic voices. It's that they're singing it in a healthy and correct manner. Now, that advice is actually good for 99% of the other operatic aspirants, because for them, singing a Fach that's too large for you will definitely hurt you. But if you really are a dramatic sized voice, you need to start getting your feet wet with that repertoire when they did a century ago. But you need to do it very carefully. You need to do it under guidance. And most young singers make the mistake of singing too much every day. They'll sing 2 and 3 hours a day. And you shouldn't be singing that much at that age. You should only sing a half hour a day at that age when you're an adolescent. So, one of the things we do is we don't allow our youngest singers to even practice on their own. They have to practice under supervision, which is how they did it back in the old days. The old days, you practice for a half an hour a day with a maestro or a teacher, a conductor of some sort, and you worked every day. But you just worked for a half an hour, but it was very concentrated work. But when you start as young as 12, 13, 14, 15, that makes an enormous difference. And so by the time you grow into your repertoire, it's all there.
Now, the last time we talked, I was really fascinated by what you said, that you believe that it's not so much about the voice itself and the talent as it is about the training and about getting that voice working properly. Can you talk about that a little bit too?
Well, one of the misperceptions about training a young dramatic voice is that you can't put a size 10 foot in a size 3 shoe. That's just as bad as trying to make a voice bigger than it is. You have to let a voice be the size that it is. And sometimes people are frightened by those big sounds that young singers make. For instance, we had a 16-year-old basso profundo who was still so scared to sing that he was making hardly any sound at all. But he actually got into vocal trouble because he was trying to squeeze his voice into his a cappella choir. So we got him into an adult choir, and that combines with a college choir. It was a community college choir where he could just sing with the voice that he had. All of a sudden, his voice blossomed, and his vocal problems went away because his voice could be what it was. And the thing is that you also have to be careful, because there are a lot of young singers that think they're dramatic voices. And sometimes you get a voice that's just singing in a healthy manner, and everybody says, oh, it's a dramatic voice. She's only 17, and she's already, if it's that big, she's probably a dramatic voice. And sometimes it's just that they're singing in such a healthy manner that it has the size that it's going to pretty much stay all its life. But it sounds bigger because they're using it properly. And you have to keep that in mind when you're looking at what does a nascent dramatic voice really sound like. And we're discovering that for women, dramatic voices, the average age it emerges is 17, and for men it's 20. Now, they might not utilize it to its maximum. You can get, an untrained voice is not going to have as much volume as a trained voice. But the actual physical size of the voice is already there. You might have some spintos that could get bigger. So that happens. Some voices do grow, but not a lot. Not a lot.
Let's talk about your voice, which is absolutely incredible, and it has been touted as a force of nature by Marilyn Horne, and so many people have commented on its sheer size as well as its agility throughout your range. It's absolutely incredible. What is your personal approach to technique?
Well, that's a complicated question, because actually singing is quite simple, but it's a very complex process to discover those simple things that you need to do to sing. And singers often develop these very complex, convoluted things that they think is making them sound good, and it's not. And usually singing is very simple. But it takes the average singer 5 to 10 years to discover what those simple things are. And then when they discover it, they go, is that all it is? They're shocked that that's all it is. But they had to go through that complex process to coordinate and find out exactly what that specific simple thing was here and what that simple thing was here. That requires knowledge, and it takes time to learn that.
And what is your approach to resonance? Is that something that you think about?
Well, I don't think about resonance. I listen for it. Mm-hmm. One of the mistaken things about resonance is there's only one thing that really moves a lot when you sing, and that's your tongue. Your soft palate moves a little bit. And if you move your lips and your jaw, they get in the way. So basically the tongue has to do all the work. So there's a great article that was put out by Scientific American where they studied the Tuvan Mongolian throat singers. How could they sing two pitches at the same time and get sometimes two and three overtones on one pitch? And it was very simple. They used their tongues. And they had two techniques. If they used their false vocal folds, they would move the tongue back and forth, front to back. And if they used their normal vocal folds, they would use the middle of the tongue and go up and down and manipulate the sides of the mouth and manipulate that space between the midpoint of the tongue, the frontal midpoint, and the hard palate.
Wow.
That's all you move. That's what you have to have an airflow, a sufficient airflow. You really have to have a sufficient airflow, and then you control it with your tongue. And it's very simple. I mean, like I say, it's a very complex process
to
discover that's all resonance is, because everything else is just a sounding board. It's just you have your resonators, which are just like a sound box, but they don't do anything. So, I mean, I can demonstrate focus. So if you go, that's all done with a tone.
Wow.
It's that simple.
Amazing.
And so when you sing, you're singing with that resonance. You're singing with the most resonances you can get.
That's amazing. I think just watching you sing, watching you perform, which we did just 2 days ago in Lohengrin, just the sheer amount of resonance that you are able to produce is just astounding. It produces a visceral experience for us audience members. It's really incredible. What are you feeling?
That's something I cultivated.
Really?
Yeah. I just listen to it and make sure it's buzzing in my ear.
Do you feel the buzz in your ear?
Yeah.
Do you feel it somewhere in the
I feel it in my
nasal?
ear. I feel my eardrums vibrate, which it's not a hearing thing. Yes, it picks up sounds and you hear it, but there's an actual physical feel when the eardrum is vibrating. I can demonstrate that to you too.
Sure.
So if I go and just don't listen, just feel what your eardrums are doing.
Mm-hmm.
Feel that vibration.
Yeah.
You go for that.
It's almost in the upper part of the ear that you feel it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's an extra thing from your hearing. It's an extra vibration on the eardrum, and that means that there's a lot of overtones that are resonating. So when I work with singers, I teach them to learn how to sense that.
It's really fascinating, truly. There's so much. There are so many follow-up questions that I want to ask, but
Go ahead.
well, I actually want to. Last time we talked, we spoke about overtones and about the fact that everything comes from the 7 pitches originally discovered by the Pythagoreans, and the fact that everything has its own resonance in the universe. And can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, biology basically reflects the way the universe is constructed, and I mean, it would make sense that crickets and birds and human beings have picked up on those overtones that basically exist in the whole universe. The pitches, like black holes, for example, have a pitch of B flat. DNA has its pitch. Everything has a pitch, and even molecules they've discovered have what they call phonons, which they have a wavelength. Everything has a wavelength, and it resonates, and they resonate with pitches. And the fact that animals like birds can mimic sound based on those overtones, and actually make music based on those pitches, and that we create. It's not an accident that we play with sound in the way the universe is constructed, and that we would respond to it in a neurological way and in a communicative way because it's in our biology. So it's reflective of the whole universe. Now, it is true that there's a lot of secret societies that, have this cosmology, and they all have their little secret things, and they have their limits, and they have their very interesting observations. But what science is discovering is that there is a music to the universe. It is a big symphony, and it's not called a string theory for by accident.
But do you believe that music can heal?
Yes, I mean, I'm not sure I believe in holding, tuning forks over chakras or anything like that. But I think that music, obviously music therapy works. And, down through the ages, I mean, there's, stories of, mad kings that have, personal, private harp players, like King David was one for King Saul. And even Gilgamesh had his minstrel, who was called Lugal-Gabanal, which means king of the big chests, because apparently singers had big chests back then too. So
wow. Yeah, that's one of those funny misconceptions that people just expect a singer to look always a certain way. All singers have to look a certain way to be able to produce that sound, which is, like you were just talking about, really not true.
Yeah. And they're they've discovered that rhythm has a lot to do with music therapy and communicative aspects too. Because, for example, if a mother puts a newborn baby on her heart, and her heart is beating at a calm 72 beats a second, the baby will stop crying and calm down. If the mother's heartbeat speeds up, the baby will become agitated. And they've experimented with that. It's more than pitch and music, but all these things combined in music, and it does have an effect. And the part that deals with music on one side of the brain, that deals with pitch, mirrors the part that deals with speech on the other. So sometime in our past, it had we probably used pitch in our communication, and we co-evolved with birds in that way. There was a convergent evolution going on with birds. In fact, they found that there are certain things that birds and humans can do that chimpanzees cannot.
Wow.
So there's something very interesting going on in terms of bird intelligence. They're discovering fascinating things about birds.
I know you're very interested in avian cognition.
Yes.
As just a personal interest.
Yes. Yes, I have a scrub jay. How this all started was the scrub jay made friends with me. It belongs to the crow family. They're blue and white and gray. It's a crestless jay. And he talks to me, comes in the house. He sits on my hand. He eats out of my hand. It's amazing. And I thought, this bird couldn't possibly be doing what I think he's doing. And so I contacted an avian specialist, someone who specializes in avian cognition, Nicola Clayton. And indeed, they were discovering these very things that I thought he couldn't possibly be doing, but it seemed like he was. For example, they have episodic-like memory, which means they can tell the difference between the past, the present, and the future, and can plan for the future. Well, until then, it hadn't been proved that only humans could do that. And she was the first one that's able to prove that, whoa, birds can do that. She was the one that proved that birds have theory of mind, which is the ability to imagine what the other scrub jay might be thinking or might be up to.
Wow.
Which is very important, which means that scrub jays, which means that the crow family are very imaginative birds. They can imagine things, and on a very sophisticated level. And it evidences itself in how they pilfer each other's stores of food, and how they hide from each other, and how they get paranoid. And it's amazing. I mean, it takes a thief to know a thief. If a scrub jay doesn't steal, it doesn't get paranoid when another one has been watching. But if one has stolen somebody's food before, then another scrub jay's watching. They hide everything.
That's really funny. The lessons we can take from the scrub jays.
Oh yes. Oh yeah.
Well, speaking of imagining things, certainly Vogner really plays with our imaginations, doesn't he? And I wanted to ask you about your experience in Lohengrin. I know that was your first time singing that opera, and how was it?
Well, I really like the role. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful role. She is quite she's not a very nice person. Some people try to play her as this sympathetic pagan, but I think she's a pagan and she's evil.
Well, she did turn, a human being into a bird.
Yes.
So.
Yes.
Speaking of the commonalities of course.
And then lied to her husband about it.
Right.
And finally he says...
I don't think he could have handled it, though, if he had known the truth. So. It's probably a good call.
Yes.
Yeah. But so what is your approach to the role? Obviously, from what I know about you, that's very different from the way you are personally. So how do you embody a character like that?
Well, I think everybody has a seed of everything in them, everything good and bad. There's a seed of that in everybody. And I think a good artist latches onto that and enlarges on that and imagines, what if, I was in this position and I made this decision, how would I deal with it? And I think that the more honest you are about who you are, the more you can portray different characters. I think that if people have a false perception of themselves, it makes it more difficult to delve into these characters. And then if you do a character, there's a very surface approach to it that doesn't really read as real, reads as artificial. Even if you're evil, you have to be real. Yeah.
You are very real. I have to say, we were really, what we noticed, what Jennifer and I noticed in experiencing your performance was just that you had a look of innocence in your eyes, which is incredible given the kind of character that you were playing. You really seemed to believe what she believed, which was amazing. I thought so. Did Vogner present a different kind of challenge from the Verdi rep that you usually sing?
Yes. Wagner's very different. The difference between Wagner and Verdi is that in Wagner it takes you 3 hours to die, and in Verdi he doesn't give you enough time to die. So, Trovatore, I mean, it's chop, 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 head chopped off, and
that's right.
And they always have trouble staging it because
so much action.
There's so much action and very little time to make it believable. Although Bose does get a decent death scene in Don Carlo. And there's a decent death scene in Otello.
That's true.
She takes a real long time to die there, but I guess
definitely.
But as a general rule, though, the Verdi characters tend to die off pretty quickly. So that's one difference.
That's true.
Yes.
Well, what about vocally? Is the orchestration presenting a different kind of challenge?
Well, I would say vocally, Verdi's a bigger challenge than Wagner. Because Wagner doesn't have those ultimate high notes. They go high, but it doesn't go really high. So it presents it presents more of a stamina problem for some people. But I find it technically easier to sing than Verdi. Not that Verdi. I mean, even though I like Verdi, and Verdi's right for me. There's something about singing Ortrud that, I don't know, it just feels like a really good role for me. So I'm going to do it some more.
Great. Well, I'm glad that the first experience was such a good one.
Yeah, I enjoyed it very much.
How do you prepare in terms of stamina and things like that? How do you prepare for a role in that sense?
The stamina is already there. If you're a professional and you're singing a lot, you're in good shape.
And the day before a performance or the day of the performance, do you have any habits or things that you like to do?
I warm up. I always show up at the theater 3 hours before, and I warm up and slowly get into the role, and I don't like to rush things.
Do you kind of just take the day off? Do you do anything
Definitely.
that day?
I don't do anything the day I perform.
And do you have any favorite warm-ups or things that you do right before you go on stage?
I have a routine, just a routine of exercises that I've done for years, and it gets me right where I need to be.
Any good luck things that you like to do?
No.
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 And
luck has nothing to do with it, unless you count, being in the right place at the right time.
In the opera?
Anywhere.
That's true.
Whether you call it luck, fate, or divine intervention. Sometimes it all has to do with being in the right place at the right time.
It's true. It's very true in general in life.
Yes.
Absolutely. Do you, I guess I have another question about technique, just in terms of, and also in terms of your preparation that day. How do you approach breath, and do you do any warm-up specifically targeted towards that?
The breath is actually incorporated into the singing exercises. When I do that, I just breathe the right way because I've been doing it for so long. I've been singing for 35 years, so it's pretty much habituated.
So you're obviously so scientifically minded in terms of your approach to the world, really, as well as singing. How do you bridge that with the artistic side and the emotional side? That's a big component also.
Well, if you're expressive, the emotion takes care of itself. It's a whole different thing to be expressive. The science has to do with the technique, the technical aspects of what you're doing. And then that's just the shell. And then you inhabit that with your soul and with what you have to say as a person. It's the technique is only the first step, and then you have to inhabit what you do.
How do you keep yourself from going too far emotionally so that your technique actually is unable to do what you want it to do?
Practice, just experience. It teaches you where that line is. It teaches you.
So when you feel like you're reaching it, do you literally take a step back? How do you stop yourself?
Well, when you're performing, things become routine. So you don't have to think about those things, and you just go out and you express. Because when you habituate things, then you don't have to think about them, and then you're just expressing, you're just doing the role. You're being the character.
And then something that I think is interesting is the role that technology has been playing, both in terms of preparation, but more importantly on stage. Where do you think we're headed in terms of that, and how does that impact what you do?
Well, I think that there are pros and cons. I think one of the things that's happening is that video is actually bringing opera to a lot of people that ordinarily don't go to opera, and I think that's a good thing. I think that it impinges a lot on how people perform, but there is a way you can do it. It's like a skill all in itself, because when you do something up close, things are much smaller, and and to get that intimacy, especially with the eyes. I know a lot of singers that when they go on stage and there's no camera, their eyes are dead. And then when they get a camera, it's like their eyes all of a sudden light up. But you know, the gestures that you do for a stage, they can be too big for a camera. So what some singers do is they wait to they find out when the camera's going to be on them, if it's possible, and then that's when they bring down they make sure that their gestures are smaller and that their eyes are more communicative. And some people try to find this half-breed thing that they do. There are ways you can do it. That you can meld the two, but it's not. It's an extra layer of expertise that makes singing just that much more difficult. But where I think technology is going to be taking us in interesting ways is effects in live performance. That's where I think it's going to be really interesting. And I think we're going to split into two art forms. I think we're going to have live theater with really great stage effects, and then they're going to go all the way with film with special effects. You know, I'm sure at some point that a ring cycle will come out that's the way but the way Wagner wanted it in terms of its romanticism, but because they have all those special effects in the movie industry, they're going to make those things work. They did the movie Tristan and Isolde, and we're getting very close to making that happen. Or to do it as a cartoon, like a Disney cartoon. I mean, it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time.
And it's interesting because Wagner had such a philosophy about his work, especially The Ring, where he didn't really view it as an opera, and he didn't have the same constraints on it that I think other composers for the opera stage specifically would have, that he might see the vision behind a cartoon version or something like that, being more poignant almost than a regular, so to speak, opera production.
Well, I don't know what his vision was, but I do know that in the future, a lot will be done with it. In a way, it will capture the imagination more than, Verdi, because Verdi is very good, but it's all about real things, real people, which has its value too. But the thing about Wagner is it's like doing the Lord of the Rings, or it's like. It's one of those fantasy things with dragons and giants and dwarves, and there's an adolescent mindset that loves that kind of thing, and it's going to happen. I'm sure of it. It's just a matter of time. Somebody's going to get smart, and they're going to do it, and it'll happen.
And you may be in it.
Oh, I don't know. I might be too old by then, but I'm sure. But if I'm around, I'll watch it. Maybe I can be in one of those. That would be nice. That would be nice. Well,
looking back on your career, you have encountered some criticism of your voice, specifically people, the naysayers earlier on, saying that, you won't be able to continue this kind of singing for many years because you're singing too loudly and things like that. What role has criticism played in your life, if any?
Well, I've been ruining my voice for 35 years. So I don't think I have to be concerned about what people say. I mean, there are still people that tell me, oh, if you use your chest voice like that, you're going to lose your voice. I can't believe that some people actually still tell me that. But they do. So...
Have you had any experiences with that, or any other comment, or any other criticism throughout your life? Have you had to overcome anything like that?
The two major criticisms that get hurled that got hurled most at me at the beginning of my career was I was going to ruin my voice. It wasn't going to last. And then the criticisms later was that I wasn't an actress. I was just a park and bark singer, which I think I proved them. I think I've proved them wrong on that count too. But sometimes people bring up the old things and dredge up the old things. But that's okay, because it doesn't matter with YouTube and everything. I mean, there's a whole pirates, videos. During the information age, it's a little harder, as we know from WikiLeaks, it's a little harder to control information now. So I think that from a historical point of view, we aren't going to have the saints that we used to, because people can't hide their flaws like they used to. On the other hand, there's a lot of fact that I think is going to come out in a historical sense that I think we never had the opportunity to have before. So I think that, even though there's no privacy, which I think is really dreadful, on the other hand, it's like nobody can control the information flow, and that's got its problems and positive points too. And I think that in the terms of the historical perspective, I think that I will stand in the historical flow of things as somebody who made a contribution. And, people will make their own judgments.
Absolutely. And have there been any challenges that you've really had to overcome throughout your career in general, beyond the criticism?
Asthma. Mm-hmm. I have asthma. So, I've had to battle that all my career. But I do.
And looking back on, what has been really, truly incredible career, have there been any highlights, any particular roles or performances that really stand out in your memory?
No.
Okay.
There's a lot of them, and it's kind of hard to...
I know. Well, sometimes there's a defining moment. There's something that happens that, whether because of something external or the opera itself.
Not really.
Any favorite roles?
No. Okay.
Any roles that you would still love to sing that you haven't yet?
No.
Okay. All right. I know that you're winding down the season now and looking forward to taking some time off at home in Nevada. And is there anything else that is coming up for you in the near future that's exciting for you?
Just my work.
Well, I want to thank you so much for all of the wonderful work that not only the incredible work that you're doing on stage and the good that's bringing to so many, but also the work that you're doing with young artists. I know that you are really helping to foster the next generation of artists. So thank you so much for all of that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you.